Hey everyone. Today, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about a little bit about EV cars or electric vehicle cars, hybrid cars versus gas-powered cars, or more so between hybrid cars and when I'm talking hybrid cars plugins versus hybrid cars non-plugins, basically. So one of the benefits, of course, with EV cars or electric vehicles are they're powered by batteries. Of course, they don't produce any emissions. They're much better for the environment than gas powered cars, and EVs are also very quiet. Put it bluntly, they are very quiet, which can be a big plus for those that live in the city or even the suburbs, for that matter. Um, so some of the benefits of EV cars, of course, are their lower operating costs. Electric cars are much cheaper to operate than gas-powered cars. The cost of electricity is much lower than the cost of gasoline, or was earlier, and EV cars require less maintenance, meaning there's not that many moving parts, meaning you don't have to worry about oil, transmission, fluid, spark plugs, etc. Basically, to the point like where a lot of that stuff requires a lot of maintenance. Um, Other aspect, of course, is it's better for the environment. Electric cars don't produce any emissions, so they're much better for the environment than gas-powered cars in that situation. They're definitely quieter. Let's put it that way. Electric cars are much quieter than gas-powered cars, which they can be for again for like those in the suburbs that don't like a lot of noise, as well as the city for that matter as well too. Unless you got the honking as well too, that plays into it. Now, the cons of an EV car. Well, there are some downsides, unfortunately. The biggest downside, of course, right now at this point is limited range. Most EV cars have a range about, maybe on average, about 200 miles. Some are trying to get to the 300 to 400 range. If they can get to the 400 range, I think that changes the whole dynamic of EV cars at that point. And especially if you do a lot of long distance driving, specifically if you travel from one state to, let's say, halfway through the country or parts of the country, it's not going to work for you at that point. Um, they're also so and because of the reason why I say this is like, oh, it's like, well, so other gas powered cars and such don't have that feature as well too. Yes, but the thing is there's not enough infrastructure in place to charge your cars. That's one of the big things. So there is a lack of infrastructure, and there's not as many charging stations available for those gas, like as gas stations are. But slowly they're getting out there. But the other factor is with it, you can't really, when you plug it in to charge, it doesn't take, it's not as quick as, let's say, a 2 minute change or 2 minute fill up or 5 minute fill up versus a charge where you got to wait like a good, at least a minimum of 30 minutes for those supercharges, or close to 2 hours to 3 hours for half a charge or something like that until your next EV charging station. Of course, the other biggest thing, of course, is which we should be seeing a drop in eventually, is prices. They're way more pricier than gas powered cars, but you'll probably see them decrease eventually, uh, as more and more cars are becoming more and more mainstream. I mean, like, remember, let's say cars when they first came out, they were very expensive, and then eventually, as more and more were mass produced and items and parts were becoming much cheaper, they became cheaper too. Now, of course, hybrid cars are a big factor as well too. Now, hybrid cars comprise of like EV cars and gas powered cars, so it's the best of both almost in ways. They use a combination of gasoline and electricity, so they get better gas mileage, and then gas powered cars for sure, and they produce fewer emissions than EV cars. Um, but one of the things is with the hybrid car though is, um, it's still a lot of moving parts. You still have to, like, there is oil involved, gas of course, as well as changing the oil, transmission fluid, etc. Basically, but of course, some of the benefits, of course, are that it has better gas mileage than a lot of gas powered cars. So you can get much more, for the bang for the buck for a gas powered car, where like some gas powered cars are, let's say, 25 miles per gallon. Hybrid cars can get to 40 to 55 miles per gallon. Definitely has fewer emissions than gas powered cars for sure. I mean, there's still some emissions, but at least it's fewer than a regular normal gas powered car. Of course, they are a little bit cheaper in a ways to main operate than gas powered cars. But one of the things is like, once, oh, that's the other biggest negative for an EV car. I should go back for a second. That's another big thing for an EV car as well too. Is if the battery goes, you're pretty much screwed for an EV car. If that battery goes, you're pretty much paying just as much, if not more so, for the battery just to replace for an EV car. Um, Eventually, hopefully, that will change to the point where like eventually batteries become interchangeable to the point like once you drive in, you should be able to change it. You know, if you want to charge something, it should be very quick. Rather than charging it, just switch the battery into another charged battery, and that's it. But again, it's very expensive. Same thing with the with the hybrid car. Um, with the batteries, if it depletes, it is much more expensive than a normal battery, but not as much so in the past. Now it's a little bit cheaper, relatively cheaper, but it's still more expensive if you deplete the battery life, or you have to replace the battery. It becomes a little bit more expensive than, let's say, buying a regular battery out of I was gonna say Sears, but AutoZone or Auto Parts. Um, of course, the other aspect as well too is it's not as good, compared to an EV vehicle. Of course, I mean, like when it comes to producing emission, it still produces emissions. Even though it's far less than gas-powered cars, they still have emissions as well too. And of course, it's not as cheap to operate as EV cars. I mean, you still have to change the oil, change transmission and such. So it is one of those things. But again, one of the aspects is with a with a non, non-hybrid, or basically a hybrid car. Sorry, with a hybrid, um, there is the infrastructure in place. So like you still use some of the electricity, but then at that point you can still put in gas and all that stuff. Um, Now, but that's really more of like the plug-in hybrid more than anything else. So you still have to plug it in for those charges, but you can still use a gas tank. There are non-plug-ins, meaning that it's built off a kinetic energy. Now, this is like what Lexus and Toyota were doing back in the day. Now they're moving towards the actual full-in plug-in hybrid and such. They are the most common type of hybrid car nowadays. They have similar battery than like a hybrid plug-ins. They have a shorter electric range. However, they're still more fuel efficient than gas-powered cars. That's, I think, when it first came out with hybrid cars, they became the most efficient. And the ones you're thinking of is basically a classic example. It's the Toyota Prius, basically. Of course, they're much more fuel efficient than gas-powered cars. Get more mileage out of the car, or more miles per gallon out of the car. Definitely more, lower operating costs. The negatives, of course, is that it does have a shorter electric range than hybrid plugins. So one of the things is because it doesn't have a as much of a short electrical range, you can use up very quickly all the electrical aspects of it, and then you're going back to the gas. So with the plug-in, at least you can still charge it. Where there's a non-plug-in, you're basically building off of kinetic and energy at that point, storing that potential energy. So that might take a bit for it to recharge up at that point. So you still are using a lot of gas. So it's not as fuel efficient as, let's say, a plug-in hybrid, but still fuel efficient more than, well, nowadays now more gas-powered cars are becoming way more fuel efficient at this point. And of course, not as efficient, not as environment friendly as EV cars is as well too. It still produces a lot of gas or a lot of emissions from the gas. So, but it's still a little bit fewer emissions, but still them some. Now, of course, with the gas-powered cars, the most common type of car on the road, they're relatively inexpensive purchase and to operate, and they have a long range, of course, but not as long of a range because the fact is let's talk about it this way. When we're talking long range, we're talking about the infrastructure in place. So you can actually drive a car for like 200 miles, 250 miles. If you're already gas, fill it up with gas tank, if gas, and that's it. You're good. Their infrastructure's there in place for that. They're also, one of the biggest benefits is it's not that expensive compared to hybrid cars or electrical cars or EV cars. Basically, it's not as expensive. It's relatively cheaper. Um, the other factor is well, one of the big negatives is basically not only is it gas powered, a lot of maintenance has to go into it. Basically, you do have to do like transmission fluids, oil changes, and such, similar to hybrids at that point as well too. So those are the biggest factors that you have to worry about. And also another factor I would say is with gas powered cars, of course, some of them are becoming more and more fuel efficient, but they still emit a lot of emissions. So let's not forget that. Now, one of the other things you got to think about is fuel cell cars. That's another thing I kind of forgot to mention at the beginning. With fuel cell cars, this is more of like a car where it's more hydrogen based. It's got literally zero emissions. All it really produces is pretty much water. That's the output. It's pretty much output. It's definitely got a long range, similar to like a gas powered car. So it's got that range and then some as well too. And also the other factor is because it's hydrogen based, just like a gas powered car, it can be quick for refueling, so you can refuel it in place very quickly. So it's one of those things where if you don't have the time and you're running out of fuel, just pump in the hydrogen and you're good. The negatives, of course, is it's expensive. It's very, very expensive, just as like an EV vehicle. It's also very limited. They're not widely available, so you will definitely have to wait. California, I think, is one of the only states that actually has a fuel cell car with some parts of infrastructure in place, but there are not as many gas stations, so or fuel cell stations for them basically. So the infrastructure is not in place, but it can't. So you can't really travel as far as you can. But one of the things is, at least with some of the hydrogen fuel, you can theoretically convert a lot of these diesel or gasoline stations to fuel cell hydrogen based. But the other biggest negative is it's hydrogen. Hydrogen is very combustible and is very explosive. So if the car does have issues where like the fuel cell, let's say cracks or something like that, it can do a massive explosion. Hence the reason why you see these blimps, they're not made of hydrogen anymore, they're all using helium. So that's one of the other big factors is hydrogen is very volatile too. So that's one of the things why you don't see as much as it is. I think they're trying to make it much more safer to the point where like if you ever get into a car accident or whatever it may be, the car doesn't explode on you. And that's one. I think that's the other big factor is because of that. That's the most factor. And the other factor is like with electricity, with an EV vehicle, you can charge it. It's not as explosive, so like you don't have as much flammable stuff on there, basically. So if the car does get into a car accident or some sort, you're not going to see an explosion or such. But again, one of the things is with an EV vehicle as well as plug-in hybrids. Nowadays, it was cheaper, but now electricity is becoming a little bit more expensive. So charging your vehicle can be more expensive, especially in California. Can be very, very expensive to charge a vehicle. With also plug-in and non-plug-ins, it comes down to the factor of gas. Depending where you're at, gas can be expensive or gas can be cheaper, depending where you're at as well too. That's why you saw a lot of people moving towards the EV route, because it's one of those things where like back then electricity was cheaper, gas was getting much more expensive, so you could charge a car overnight and have no problems. Nowadays, because electricity, the electrical grid is getting overpowered, unless there's some alternative way of producing this electricity, it's becoming more and more expensive as well too. So that's why you don't see as many people powering up their cars. And back then as well too, Teslas and all and all the power stations, they were offering these free charging stations. So wherever you're at, trying to get people to use them, you were able to basically charge them for free at one point or another. Now it's changed a little bit as well too, unfortunately. Now, which type of car is best to use? It depends on your needs and budget, basically. If you're looking for a car that's good for the environment and you have the money to spend, as well as if there's the infrastructures in place, but if not the infrastructure, but if you do have money and that at that point, EVs make more sense more than anything else. If the infrastructure was in place for fuel cell cars make more sense. If you're looking for a car that's more affordable and don't mind sacrificing some environmental benefits, then a hybrid car is probably a better option for you. If you're looking for a car that's really expensive and you're like on a tight budget, then of course, and then you need that sort of long range, where if you're doing long distance traveling, then the car, gas powered car makes more sense to you, basically. Ultimately, the best way to choose a fuel cell car, between a fuel cell car, a hybrid car, or a gas powered car, is to drive, or EV vehicle for that matter, is to test drive all of them basically, and see which one you prefer. Some people that want to drive an EV vehicle, they sometimes want to hear that power. You're not going to see it, but it can be much faster. And you will get to 0 to 60 very quickly compared to a gas powered car or a hybrid car for that matter. Some people like that power as well too, and so that's why they want the gas powered cars as well too. And in those cases, sometimes they want to muck around with the parts, basically, like with the engine itself, not muck around, but tune the engine, even modify the engine as well as the transmission and such, basically, and adding more stuff to it, basically, to give it more power. Some people like doing that. But with that, I hope I gave you a high-level overview between the 4 or 5 different types, basically, where it's like you got the EV vehicle, plug-in hybrid, non-plug-in hybrid, gas-powered, as well as fuel cell. Now, of course, you can say diesel as well too, as diesel engines and biofuel biofuel cars, biofuel powered cars. The biofuel power cars are a different story. I want to say it might be the right way to go, but it doesn't get you as much mileage. And two, the other factor is like you are recycling at that point. But again, it's one of those things where a lot of things are involved with that, and the engines themselves are not that cheap for the conversion of that matter. With diesel cars, some people say diesel might be much more friendlier from a perspective of environmental friendly, but when it comes to more mileage, that's where gas comes into play. A gas fuel car versus a diesel fuel car, for that matter, or for that matter, biodiesel fuel. And that's the other factor as well too. Is let's not forget with the EV vehicles, um, you are drawing power from the electrical grid. Question is, where does this electricity come from? Everyone seems to forget that part. Where the electricity comes from? We're still generating it from the environment. We're still doing coal-based or coal-based, gas-based, or whatever it may be that's still inverting the environment. If it's solar-powered, wind-powered, and geothermal-powered, electricity, different story altogether then, right? But in any case, I hope I answered any of your, not I don't want to say answer your questions, but I hope we gave you some insight into some of the, what choices you might want to choose. Of course, you want to do your own research. You should do your own research and figure out some of that stuff. With EV vehicles as well, specifically EV vehicles, there are some tax credits, of course, but those are those that are produced and manufactured in the U.S. Whereas also hybrid vehicles, I think there are some tax rebates, specifically plug-in hybrids, not non-plug-in hybrids. And with that, I'll leave it at that. Please leave a comment in the comment section if you have any questions. If you want me to elaborate a little bit more into this subject, let me know and I will do so. Also, if you enjoy my content, enjoy my videos, enjoy this video or my channel, please subscribe if you haven't subscribed. And if you like the video, as I said, please like or dislike. I will know from there if this is a subject matter I should push into and focus on more, a little bit more on with my channel. And also, if you don't like my videos or don't like my channel, but you still want to watch them just to get riled up or just to make fun of me, you're welcome to do so. I just ask that you subscribe as well too. And with that, I'll leave it at that. Unfiltered, unedited, and unrehearsed. Until next time.